FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio.
It almost seems like I sat down this morning with our production staff and said, what can we do that would make a really great April Fool's joke? And I swear I'm not. And I've explained to you how we're sort of waiting for my friend over at CNN, Piers Morgan, to join the program. And it looks like he just called in and he's on the line with us now. Piers, this better not be an April Fool's joke.
April Fool. I'm here.
I'm so glad that you called in. I appreciate it. So I can come on your program tonight.
I've got the courage to do this, and I've been obviously quaking in my little British boots, but I finally got the courage this morning. I thought, I'm going to do this.
Well, I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you called in. And obviously, you know, I was telling your producer that I don't want it to be like a shout fest. I just think it's an interesting discussion to have. And so I appreciate you coming on the program to do that. Now,
sure, no problem.
Now what is going on tonight that you all want me on your program tonight so badly? Are you serious? Are you going to April Fool prank me? What's going on?
No, I always like having you on the show, as you know, and I thought we had a very good heated debate last week about gun control. Clearly today you've got the start of the baseball season, and apparently every game they've been doing tributes to the Sandy Hook victims. You've also got James Holmes, the Aurora shooting suspect, but the prosecutors have said they want the death penalty. I think that in itself is a fascinating debate to have.
Yes.
And you know, the guns issue remains at the forefront of the news agenda, and I think that you have a very clear opinion on this, and I have a very clear opinion. They're not the same, but I respect your right to have yours, and I think you should respect my right to have mine.
Well, absolutely. And of course I do. I mean, it's you know, the First Amendment is something on which I am a purist. Now, you were a little angry at me on Friday, or I think you were joking with me. I'm not quite sure which it was, because sometimes Twitter can be very hard to decipher that way. But you had said in a piece that I put up on redstate.com that I had misquoted you. And then you later said that, well, I didn't misquote you, that I just flat out lied. Now, explain to me, what is your perspective on this? Because I never actually quoted you. I just put the full video up in my observation.
Well, here's the thing. The whole piece that you wrote was predicated on the fact that I had apparently said I wanted to disarm America of all its guns. Now, anyone who's listened to my show regularly knows I have never said that, and nor do I believe that that is even possible, even if you wanted to. So the article that you wrote was a completely false premise you derived from an exchange we had on air. I published the transcript of it, and you were basically trying to play some strange game about whether I believed it was better if 7 people were killed or 30 people were killed based on the size of magazines for assault weapons. And I said, well, if you're going to give me a choice, then I'd rather 23 less people were killed, obviously. But if you want me to give an ideal number, I would like no people in America to be killed by guns. And this set you off on a very bizarre tangent as far as I was concerned. Because I can't believe that any of your listeners would not want to have a situation where no Americans get killed by guns. And I assume that you would agree with me that the utopia in terms of gun violence in America is that there isn't any.
Right.
So we both, I think, would start from the same place, which is how do we reduce the gun violence in America from its current extremely high level? You and I disagree about how you get there.
Well,
that I would have thought is the common ground, isn't it?
You understand why I came to that conclusion, though, because for several months leading up to that particular exchange, you have been predicating loss of life to magazine capacity, which, you know, while I disagree with it and I think it's illogical, I understand your perspective on it. But I just think it's illogical because you spent several shows saying, well, loss of life is tied to magazine capacity, which is why individuals are working to reduce magazine capacity. And if that's true, then the logical conclusion of that line of thinking is to assume that the best conclusion, the best remedy is to have 0. That's the magazine capacity. No rounds in the chamber, period. Nothing in the magazine, period.
But that's the piece you wrote, but of course I never actually said it. So my point about you lying, you lied or you didn't hear me.
It's
your
logic.
When you saw the transcript, I quite clearly never said that I wanted to have 0 magazines. What I said was I would like to have
I never
0
said that you
gun
did.
tests, and I
never
repeated
said
that
you did.
several times.
I never said that you did.
My belief about magazines is this. Is that if you look at the recent pattern of mass shootings in America, the last 4 or 5 of the biggest have involved these disenfranchised, mentally unstable, usually white males in their early 20s. And you look at James Holmes in Aurora, you look at Adam Lanza at Sandy Hook, and they have clearly been attracted, for whatever reason, to high-powered assault rifles. You, I know, would quibble with the description of an AR-15.
Well, you're leaving out 2 of them. You're leaving out Fort Hood and you're leaving out Virginia Tech, which was even deadlier.
Right,
and those were done with handguns.
Right, but I'm talking about in the last 6 months. And the preferred weapon of choice in the last 5 mass shootings in America in the last 6-7 months has been the AR-15. And I think it's right to ask why that is. And I think the answer is given by what Holmes did at Aurora. He went in, he had a magazine with 100 bullets in it.
But why discount the others?
Because he realized he was in a dark movie theater, and he realized he wouldn't have much time to reload before somebody would grab him.
Right.
And so he went for the highest possible magazine that he could have. Now, my belief is that if it was illegal to have that kind of magazine, it would at least be a lot harder for somebody like Holmes to get hold of it.
But see,
to me, the idea that somebody like him, who I think is 24 years old, wait a minute, to get on the internet and
anyone can make a magazine in their garage.
6,000 rounds of ammunition and 100 magazine.
But anyone can make a magazine in their garage, though. That's the thing. I mean, it's unenforceable because magazines are universal. They're interchangeable, and you can very easily make them in your garage.
It's unenforceable. My view is, if you have a law, you have to enforce it. And there are many issues about gun violence in America, but one of the key ones
you and I agree with that.
is a failure by many police forces, in my view, in the country to correctly apply the law.
Thank you. We agree on that. We agree on that. And that's one of the big things that actually happened in Pima County with Loeffner, because there are multiple reports from media outlets there that say that there were 2 different reports into the Pima County Sheriff's Office. One reportedly came from the community college, which he was banned from because they said that he was too mentally unstable, and the Sheriff's Office reportedly never did anything. That's a clear case of not applying the law. And the community college itself, they didn't apply. Their own protocol.
But I agree with you that the law should be applied and is not being applied correctly in many areas of gun violence in America.
Exactly.
And I think that is a key
so
part
we agree
of it,
on
as
that.
is the abject failure to invest in mental health funding.
But why?
And various other issues. There are also things that we agree on, and I think that's important that both sides should come together where there's agreement.
Right.
My worry at the moment with the gun control debate is that the pro-gun lobby has been so effective and so loud and vocal that actually, in the end, I'm not sure what is going to happen, if anything, in terms of gun control. There's not even agreement on background checks, which I find absolutely extraordinary. The idea that people
it's because there's so many false positives.
Universal background checks, I find utterly baffling.
It's because there's the system is not implemented well, and it's impossible. Let me ask you this: can you hang on with me for a couple of minutes? We're up against a hard break. Would you be willing to hang on with me? Because we'll talk about that.
Go ahead, no problem.
Excellent. Hang on with me just for a minute. I appreciate that. We are joined by my friend Piers Morgan, whose show on CNN airs weekdays beginning at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, and he graciously held over this very hard break. For this segment, we were talking, Piers, thank you for that, and we were discussing the background checks. That's something that has been a topic of been one of the requirements going towards the gun control package that the Senate's going to be hearing, the subject of universal background checks. And right before we went to break, we were discussing how there's so many false positives with the system the way it is. Like Teddy Kennedy, for instance, I don't even remember how many times he was denied to even fly because of the no-fly list. And by expert analysis, the background check, the NICS database, is even wonkier than that. So there are some things that give people hesitancy to burden it even more.
Yeah, but that's because the current system just doesn't work. I mean, you see every week investigative journalists. There's one from a very reputable British BBC program a few weeks ago. He just went to a gun show in America, bought an AR-15 without any questions being asked. And to me, if you have the preferred weapon of choice for mass shooters in the last 2 or 3 years in America being able to be acquired by people in that haphazard, casual manner with absolutely nobody having any idea who they are, whether they're mentally stable, whether they're felons or anything, to me is utter lunacy. And I think that the whole debate about guns, you met with this in mind. I haven't heard anyone, whether it's Senator Feinstein, whether it's Barack Obama, whether it's me or anybody else who's been campaigning for gun control, I've not heard anyone say they want to take anyone's gun away. Right. It's not about going into people's homes and removing what they already have. It's about acknowledging that there are a few strands to guns violence in America at the moment. One is the predominant one, which is the problem you have in places like Chicago, with young gang members blowing each other to pieces with handguns and so on, and that is a particular issue that has to be dealt with. Then you have the mass shootings, which have become a procession of disturbed young, normally white men using assault rifles like AR-15s. And you have to ask, why are they doing this? And I'm sure it's a mixture of mental health problems, violent video games to a small degree, because most of them seem to have been playing those, to the readily availability of these weapons to people who shouldn't be able to get hold of them. I've got no problem with the premise of law-abiding gun owners who say to me, but I want to have my gun to shoot for sport or to hunt or whatever. Nor do I have any argument with the one that you put forward to me, which is I want to have a gun at home to protect myself. But I haven't heard of many stories in the last 10 years in America of anyone needing or preferring to use an assault rifle like an AR-15 with 100-bullet magazine. And I don't think there is any reason why you need that. And so I think that there are points of agreement, but there are also points when, to me, going forward, it makes no sense that the reaction in America to Sandy Hook is that the fastest-selling weapon in America since then, in the last 3 months, has been the weapon that young person used to murder those poor children. That, to me, is a completely irrational, illogical, and offensive way to respond to that. And that's why I get so exercised about it.
Oh, no, I know you feel passionately about it. Your discussion of, you understand that those who say that they want to be able to keep their guns for hunting and all of that, that would make perfect sense if that's what the Second Amendment was based on. The Second Amendment, though, was based not just for being able to hunt, but it was also about being able to defend oneself against an individual aggressor, or to defend against any sort of domestic or non-domestic threat, or even government tyranny. And that's what our Second Amendment is about. So if it was just, it sounds great if the Second Amendment was only about hunting. And you had said something to me that I found very interesting. You mentioned that the AR-15s, seems to be the weapon of choice for people who want to kill, and so on and so forth. And I was looking at the FBI crime statistics from the years 2007 to 2011. And the rifles that people like Senator Feinstein and others are wanting to ban, for instance, in 2011, there have only been 323 deaths caused by the rifles that Democrats are looking to ban. But handguns have caused the deaths of over 6,000 individuals. And if we look at things like knives...
I just explained all that. I'm not disputing any of those statistics. What I'm saying, though, is there has been an undeniable escalation in both the volume and the scale of mass shootings in America since 2007. And if you look at what's happened in the last 6 months, you've had at Aurora the single biggest shooting incident involving one shooter and the number of Americans that he hit and either wounded and killed. It was 70 people, 12 were killed, and 58 were wounded. And then at Sandy Hook, the worst ever school massacre. So not a university, but a school massacre. And so what you're seeing is an escalation in the number of these shootings and the scale of them.
But that's not what the statistics on the FBI site show.
Has got to be better than we can't do anything, and the only thing we can do is go out and buy more weapons. That, to me, is not a rational response.
Well, just to look at the statistics, the rifles on the FBI site, and this is at FBI.gov, 453 deaths by rifles in 2007, 380 in 2008, 351 in 2009, 367 in 2010, 323 in 2011. And so far right now, 2012 is less than what 2011 was. And it would seem to me statistically that there has been a trend in the decrease of deaths. And I agree with you. I'm all for about preventing the loss of life. But I don't look at it as though magazine capacity, that is what has to do with it. Now, you had mentioned something as well, looking at what is motivating individuals, like, for instance, Chicago. There's so much focus on Sandy Hook, but Chicago, you have the equivalent of several Sandy Hooks every single month in Chicago with the loss of life in Chicago youth. To look and see what is motivating that, I agree with you on that. I think that's something that needs to be discussed, but unfortunately, it's so overshadowed. What are your thoughts on that? Like, are you planning to do any shows on that?
I've done a lot of coverage of what's happening in Chicago. I think it's appalling what's happening in Chicago.
Right.
I think it was 500 people killed by guns in Chicago last year alone. And to me, if you look at the way that New York has dealt with this problem, and you're not going to like this, but they have very strict gun control in New York. But the difference to Chicago, where they also have strict gun control, is that in New York, they've enforced it. And they have now had the least gun violence they've had since the 60s. In Chicago, I think there is a failure from all forms of law enforcement there to fully enforce the law and tackle what is an out-of-control problem. In Los Angeles, where I am currently, they have really tackled the gang problem head-on, and they've had a lot of success recently. This is about law enforcement as much as anything else. In New York, they have been passionate about enforcing the law and getting criminals off the streets. I totally agree with you that that should be a number one priority. But, when you throw those statistics at me about the weapons used in shootings, I don't dispute any of that. I never have done. But I have noticed that there is an indisputable pattern of escalation in mass shootings, normally by the same kind of Americans, young, white, deranged males, who are using the same kind of weapons, AR-15s. And there's got to be a question mark about why are they using these with high-capacity magazines? And the answer is, I went down to a Houston gun store, as you know, and gun range recently, and I fired them. And I fired a number of handguns, and I fired a number of rifles and so on. By far the easiest to use was the AR-15. I was stunned by both the power of it and also by the speed with which I could use it, having barely fired a gun in my life. And when you realize how easy they are to use, and you realize you can put a magazine with 100 bullets attached to it, that is why James Holmes chose that preferred way of going into that movie theater. That is why Adam Lanza wanted 30-bullet magazines at the school. Had they been using 10-bullet magazines, I'd say to you, fine, there's not an issue. But they are using high-capacity magazines with very easy-to-use assault rifles. And that is the pattern that's been developing, and that is a pattern America has to tackle.
Why do you leave out Fort Hood and Virginia Tech, though, which were done with handguns very recently?
I don't leave them out, but they have
a couple of years.
I was on there at CNN. I can only, I joined CNN a week after Gabby Gifford was shot in the head and nearly killed, and 6 other people were killed. And I was stunned that nothing happened then. And since then, there's just been a procession of senseless shooting massacres, as well as the undercurrent of regular daily gun violence in America. And it's heartbreaking. You can accuse me of many things, but ultimately, I just want more Americans to live and less Americans to be killed by guns.
Right.
And I would imagine that you agree with that.
Right. No, I do agree with that. We just, I think, differ on the means. Last quick question I have for you, because I know you have to get ready for tonight's show, which I will see you on. Why do these continue to happen in gun-free zones?
What do you mean?
Why do shooting massacres continue to happen in gun-free zones? Virginia Tech was a gun-free zone. The Aurora Theater was a gun-free zone. Sandy Hook was a gun-free zone. If these are the laws that you and others want, why then do these massacres continue to happen in areas which are designated by law as gun-free zones? You see,
there has never been a shred of evidence that any of these shooters ever based the decision-making process on where to do their atrocities because they knew they were gun-free zones. There's never been a note. There's never been a reason. There's presumption
that we know
by the gun lobby that they are gun-free zones. The reality is, if you want to commit mass carnage in America, you don't have to go to a school because it's a gun-free zone. You can walk out into the street and just start gunning people down. That's why I say it's a complete red herring, the gun-free zone thing. I can say to you, all planes are gun-free zones, but when was the last shooting on a plane in America? But it would be a fairly facile argument because actually they banned all planes from America, and they now have marshals whose job it is to try and stop anyone doing anything bad on them. And that's why you don't get shootings on planes. So, you can have that argument to a sort of illogical or logical degree, depending on how your mind works. But in the end, I would say back to you and to any of your listeners who think that I'm talking nonsense about guns, is that I come from a country which had a very similar incident to Sandy Hook, and that was at Dunblane in Scotland in the mid-90s, where 16 young 5-year-olds in a classroom were shot dead by a maniac. And as a result of that, Britain not only banned all assault weapons, but it banned all handguns. Now, you cannot do that in America because there are 300 million guns in circulation. It would be physically impossible to do it, and therefore I have never suggested that should happen. But as a result of that ban in Britain, we have, as you know, between 30 and 40 gun murders a year in Britain compared to 11 to 12,000 in America.
You have more violent crimes, though, too.
Not a single shooting at a school in Britain since 1996. And there's a very similar pattern.
But you've had other, there have been other massacres.
Well, Britain hasn't lot of problems, and I've never disputed it. Britain has appalling problems involving knife crime and obesity and underage pregnancy and yobbery and thuggery and all these things. I'd never dispute that. I've written about this many times. But the one thing that Britain got right was it made it very, very difficult for criminals and the mentally insane to get hands on weapons. And in America, the cultural issue, which is that there are so many weapons in circulation now, it is very, very easy for bad people to get their hands on guns. I'm simply suggesting you should, going forward, draw a line and say we are going to make it more difficult in future for the Adam Lanzers and the James Holmeses to get their hands on assault rifles.
Well, the
and
law
that
did
would be
work.
a great step forward.
The law did work in Connecticut. He wasn't able to purchase one, but he stole one from, and that's a kind of another discussion as to whether his mom.
Well, he
should
took
have
his
kept him
mother's,
up.
and his mother didn't lock them up. His
Right.
mother clearly.
But that's not a failure of gun law. That's a failure of personal responsibility.
Had Asperger's and autism, and he was alone. She knew that he played violent video games, and her response to that was to have guns all over the house and to take him to shooting ranges.
That's not a gun law
and
failure.
I say that God rest her soul, she's dead because he killed her. But that mother has a lot of answering to do. That is not good gun ownership. That is reckless.
I'll
and we
leave you
saw
with
what
this.
happened as a result.
I'll leave you with this. I was looking at figures from the European Union Commission about the number of violent crimes per 100,000 residents in England. It's about 2,000 compared to just 466 in America. So even though you've worked to make it difficult and to outright ban handguns, it hasn't stopped the problem of crime, which seems to me kind of underscores my point that it's just a tool.
But it doesn't, though, because I'm sure most of you listen to be robbed or to have a burglary at their house than to lose their life through a gun bullet. And the point is that the thing about guns is that they are final. You get hit by a gun, 100,000 Americans a year.
But you could possibly have less crime.
Of those, 30,000 get killed in it. And if you want to carry on having 30,000 Americans get guns a year, that's fine.
But
you cannot have a situation
oh no.
a year lose their lives from guns.
Well, you also mentioned that you forget to mention that according to FBI crime statistics, Uniform Crime Reports, you have 2.1 million cases annually of individuals using firearms in America for self-defense. 10% of those, Piers, are women who use them to stop sexual attacks. So that's always not.
Dana, again, you see, you're all these statistics to suit your agenda.
No, those are facts. Those are facts. I mean, it's important.
As you well know, the number of women who are shot in incidents of domestic violence in America is frightening. And that also has to stop. And the number of people who are accidentally killed by guns in America is frightening.
2.1 million a year. Piers, I will see you tonight. Our topic, of course, will be Loeffner.
It's been good doing battle with you, and I shall see you tonight.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate you calling in. Take care.
Take care. Bye.